The woman you meet in this episode, Katsi Cook, is a beacon in an array of quiet, powerful worlds. She is a magnetic, joyous, and loving presence, and the public conversation we offer up here was part of a several-day gathering where a fantastic group of young people, who I'd describe all as social and spiritual creatives, had gathered to be nourished, to explore the depths of what community can mean, to become more grounded and whole. They have taken to sitting at the feet of this Mohawk wise woman, mother and grandmother, and I very quickly understood why. In the realm of professional accomplishment, Katsi is globally renowned in the field of midwifery. Her practice and teaching are based in ancient ancestral knowledge and have taken an esteemed place in research and advances in the science of environmental reproductive health. She's founder of the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives of Canada. Her work in her country is at heart, as she says, about the reclamation of the transformative power of birth. And Katsi Cook is helping our world and new generations recover the natural human experience which my generation in time had begun to lose, of cross-generational companionship and care. Her own grandmother delivered her into the world in her big, quiet iron bed, as Katsi recounts, and took care of her extended family from womb to tomb. This entire weekend I attended, and this conversation you'll hear sitting in a room of mostly young people was an exercise in the art of eldering, which Katsi Cook calls nothing more and nothing less than generational wealth transmission. I'm Krista Tippett, and this is On Being. I interviewed Katsi Cook at the All Souls Interfaith Gathering in Shelburne, Vermont. She had just published a new book called Worlds Within Us, Wisdom and Resilience of Indigenous Women Elders. Among the women featured in that book is her sister-in-law, Loretta Afraid of Bear Cook, who sat on the other side of me, as did their husbands and other elders esteemed in this room and in our world. You will just have to believe me that they all simply radiate in their bodies. And as you'll hear me mention near the end of our conversation, Katsi was wearing a pair of glittering shoes, something like what Dorothy wore in Oz, to match her spirit. Well, I'm a little bit speechless, but we have an hour of clock time. We have a space here, a handful of time, really. I want to say briefly what an honor it is for me to be here and also to be in conversation with you and to be sitting between the two of you. And just for 12 hours or something like that, I've been experiencing this beautiful community that is forming, these relationships across generations and cultures, but which speak to our belonging to each other and our need for each other. The occasion, or an occasion, of this conversation is this book, which I believe everyone has, that Katsi has written. There are so many ways we could approach a conversation, but as I tried to sit with not just this work, but the work of your life and other writings that other people, these other family of yours have contributed to, it occurred to me that maybe a way we could fruitfully fill this short time is to work with language and words and vocabulary. We started with this. It is true of all of our spiritual traditions that, as the ancient rabbis say, words make worlds, mm-hmm. Right? And this prayer, this summoning that we just experienced in kind of fractionally, we got a taste of what would be a longer prayer. The words that come before all else also honor how words can bless and sanctify and summon a reminder of our place in the larger earth and cosmos and bring our oneness and wholeness into being. I'm also very aware in my work of, the limits of words also are sacred and how we're always pointing and And that's also where ritual comes in. Sometimes truth must be expressed in our bodies. But something that strikes me when I read this is vocabulary, a lexicon that you give. And I'd kind of like to, and so these are qualities that you observed in the lives of Native women elders. They're also qualities that you live with. And I think it would be really valuable to walk through some of those for this group of people as a way in to a whole world, worlds within us, as you say. And so one of them I'd like to start with is this notion of yours that women are the first environment.
Oh, thank you for that. As a young woman myself, I was fascinated by the elders in my community, not just my grandmother, but even stories of grandmothers who were no longer there, carried through the conversations. Special conversations you have when you're out hoeing corn with your grandmother, learning that the fish head has to go under the corn seed to create, and with corn husks to create the warmth for the seed to grow. And so growing up amongst elders who gave birth, some of them hanging on the kitchen doorknob by themselves. And so when the opportunity arose to develop an Indigenous women's network through the elder women of key communities in North America, I and others were invited to consider what are the characteristics. And I traveled across the communities, saw photographs in libraries, black and white photos of elders in a Lame Deer, Montana community where my colleague at Spirit Aligned Leadership Program, who selected these 8 superlative elder women from across North America, key. And so the other aspect was they are the transition from a historic moment where, as my beloved sister-in-law, Loretta Afraid-of-Bear Cook, lived firsthand the impacts of the Dawes Act and other federal policies that really made it impossible to thrive economically, socially, politically, any which measure. Those laws are still on the necks of Indigenous people. In that boarding school era that was so painful, there are elder women now about 78 or 87 and growing of the Spirit Aligned Leadership Program, but we had intentionally looked for women who, in spite of all of that insult and rupture, to be told who we are and what we know has no value, and to recover. So this mother world that we all come from has a lot of knowledge spoken in Mohawk, but in English shared with me as when a woman is in the family way, the baby hears through her ears and sees through her eyes, especially in the last trimester, the last dream days before the delivery. And that and other teachings to the point a pregnant woman shouldn't go to a funeral, but there's always an antidote in nature. And so if wild ginger tea is made and put on the top of the refrigerator when she comes back from the funeral of a grandfather or somebody that you have to see she wipes herself with that medicine when she gets home to protect the baby. So these were teachings that were coming back into the world through midwifery communications. It isn't just a lab result and a clinical chart and a medical gaze. There has to be more to bring our women and our families out of those deeply dark times where we were deprived of language and ceremony. So woman is the first environment I began to see in the practice of caring for mothers that naturally took me into environmental health research. I see a woman, she's part of a larger body. These things that Sogokwinyungu talked about, the waters, the earth. There's a relationship there that has to be cultivated so that the baby has an embodied memory coming into the world of something that's going to help that baby survive. And so the first environment, the first relationship, the first experience, the first exposure happens in the mother's womb. My mother taught me that's the woman's nest. And that's where the baby grows. And in the early days of the breast milk study, we had to bring together multiple languages, including woman as the first environment, explaining that to deans of schools of public health, of epidemiology, and those research lenses. So to integrate the accumulating literatures of epigenetics and its impact on the genomes. My husband and I lived at Cornell University, and we were on the tail end of a spectacular geneticist who won a Nobel Peace Prize. She described transposition of genes in the corn. And in growing corn on our farm with Cornell University, all of those principles that make up woman as the first environment, at every biosphere, in the indigenous world, there's 18 of them. In Canada, there's always an index woman, indigenous woman in that biosphere who relates continued to the medicines, plants, the ceremonial life, the languages, the lineage, knowledge. And these women are such women. And they are the first spiritual environments for us to be nourished from.
And I think for you, there's really no, I sometimes think about how I believe our species, if we survive, well, we'll look back at this Western modern language of body, mind, spirit, and say, what were they talking about, right? Because science itself is, but I think for you, when you say spiritual, like the spiritual environment, the biological environment, the genetic environment, the physical and the spiritual, and all these other distinctions we've made, emotional, mental, cognitive, they're all one. Right? Another phrase or notion, which I think is especially vivid in this room, is this notion of eldering as a transmission of generational wealth.
Yes, it's the first time I use that kind of phrase.
Really?
I've been fascinated by intergenerational wealth transmission. And of course, we all know the patterns in American society. But according to a paper I read, and I can't recall the citation, it's knowledge. And I think other knowledge systems have already noticed that the wealth is the knowledge. And in coming from the communities we come from, and the women in this book who come from communities where their knowledge is from the macro to the micro, I think I've gotten off track a little here. Krista, could you repeat?
Well, just
what you're digging for.
I really just partly want to. To me, this language, this phrase, is a gift. Eldering as a transmission of generational wealth. I also heard, because I was very privileged to be at dinner with the two of you last night. I heard Jose say, "There is what happened to us, and there is who we are." And so I think that wealth is about the metabolizing of those things, but it is about who one is and has been present, and not just a history, a telling of what happened.
Absolutely.
Another phrase you use of these women is, or of qualities of Native women elders, is valiant activism. Valiant activism. And what is that word, valiant? How does that qualify the notion of activism?
It's actually the name of a leading Indigenous woman, not in this book, but as many are not in books at this point. Valiant, I think of a colleague, and when we celebrated her, we unpacked the word valiant, and it had to do with courage and bravery. And I think from the Western mind, Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc in France, the courage.
The fierceness, too.
Pardon?
A fierceness.
Absolutely. My sister-in-law, who's in the book Petulutawi, Loretta Afraid of Bear Cook, is such a character. She's fierce, courageous. She comes from elder women who went through massacre, depossession, and continue to do so in the state of South Dakota. But the fierceness and the courage that they hold comes from connection to earth, to what Sagoquinyungwas, Tom Porter, addressed and invited us in to love and appreciate. And those elders have such a world that they hold within them, where that courage, that fierceness, that prayer, it's grounded in the earth, and in the sun, and in the life force that Sagoquinyungwas shared.
And this wealth of knowledge that is transmitted precisely has so much to do with knowing this groundedness, this wholeness of which human beings are a part. One of the fascinating things about being alive in this time right now, to me, is how science is coming along. And for example, there's this beautiful science now of how forests operate along principles of mutuality and reciprocity and something you could call compassion, and how nutrients flow where they're needed, and how it is communal. And you were just really pointing at the fact that your people, your traditions this is knowledge you've possessed all along, right? Science is actually saying something that has been known now in scientific terms. Somewhere, I think I watched you online, and you were speaking to some younger people, and you spoke about how the word ecology echoes another word for slippery elm tree. So again, using the language and the imagery and the metaphors of the natural world to describe vitality itself. Would you share that word with us? Do you remember that? Yes.
Oncology.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a moment when we were doing first environment communications in Akwesasne, and Marita Thompson was my program associate who used her fluency in the Mohawk language and her certification as an educator to design children's programs to help them understand some of the language we were using, working with families on intergenerational movement of PCBs through human tissues. And Marita is an artist. You know how the artist is one who's driving change with imagery. And a key medicine in our ways of birthing is the slippery elm, and it's called oncology. Wahe, soko guinyungwas. Oncology. And Marita, because we're working on environmental health communications, commented, Gaji, that word ecology sounds like oncology. That makes us oncologists. I said to her. So thank you for reminding me of that. So even in Marita's work, we were thinking we need to go with to other indigenous communities and share our data and our protocols. It was the early days of community-based participatory research. Those were frameworks that came out as later on in this, what started as a breast milk study. So she did a painting of a slippery elm tree, and standing in the tree was a mother with her long hair representing the smooth bark of the slippery elm, holding a newborn baby, and other trees, slippery elm trees around her. And they say Mohawk is a language of metaphor, like, as, those kinds of prepositions. It's a language of metaphor, and as Marita was painting, she was entering the forest. And the painting she was doing invited imagery that she shared with me. She said, Gaji, you know how when you go in the woods in the fall, it rains and brings the leaves down, and there's like a little rivulet created while there's so much water and leaves flowing. And she said, it's almost like a woman goes into the woods and she looks and sees such a rivulet of water covered with leaves, and she kneels down on the earth in front of it, and she moves the leaves, and she's pulling the baby out of the water, out of the earth, or a dark, wet place. That's one of the Mohawk words for midwife. It just means she delivers or something like that. But again, when you live your language in the context to which it belongs, opportunities of insight, of imagination, of energies, of learning become available. So the power of words, the power of imagery, creativity is to be found in those.
You're just reminding me of a conversation I had a couple of years ago with somebody who's a technologist, but also an ecologist, and reminding us that, and of course so much in your tradition is passed orally, with the words themselves.
Yes.
And so much of what happened, something that happened in writing, that pictograms, that what began as letters, in fact letters that we use now, were all images that came from the natural world. They were all pictures of animals or water, right? They were images of nature. And then there was this translation, this codification of that linguistic connection with the earth to something that was disconnected, which became the way we write the language we use, right? Which disconnected our language itself. I think something else that from midwifery, from thinking and all your research and knowledge and all the work you do with babies and women and childbirth and and kind of the lifespan is about the importance of the nervous system. And, that's another thing that Western science is learning so much about that you've actually been observing for many years. Something the vagus nerve almost feels like a discovery now in Western medicine,
Yeah,
right?
it is. There's books now about
right, books about
vagal
it.
healing.
It's all new, but the vagus nerve is, I guess, that technical term. But it's also called the wandering nerve, which is how you refer to it. But one thing I've been, listening to people talk about this great discovery recently, and what nobody had said to me, because it runs through right the voice box and the heart, but the gut, but also the cervix.
Yes.
I had not heard any scientists I've spoken with mention that fact.
Because they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
They're not. I had a friend in a former Israeli military person who founded the Pain Alleviation and Therapy and Healing Path, runs a clinic in England, who came to visit and tried to teach me how to deliver, to assist the delivery of a placenta stimulating the sacroiliac joint, just the nervous pathways, the vagal pathways. And, the way you're educated in different systems will inform what you think is possible. In a time when midwives in Mexico don't do pelvic exams. They have other ways of approaching the body. So yeah, the attention and how to cut loose with your imaginative capacity. And the ceremonial world is where that happens, the integration of knowledges. And we know it's possible. And these women in this book all live in a world where I think of Sarah James, whose story you must read. Just take time with her. She works in Arctic Village and holds, of all the different work she does for her community, she holds a birthing song for the Caribou Nation, who come past a river by the side of her village at a certain time of year, and in expectation of their arrival, she will sing their birthing song. And says the caribou are in our hearts and we are in theirs. So the integration of sciences is to be found in those old ways of responding, of reacting, of adapting, of what's called wisdom. And so knowledge arises out of those inputs into a context where language and ways of thinking and having experienced recovering from being told that your language belongs to the devil or something evil, dark. So
right. Languages themselves were outlawed. So just to take this one a little farther, how would you, for you, so sometimes I've been saying recently that I feel like beneath, underlying everything that we analyze in political terms and economic terms and geopolitical terms, we just have a distressed nervous system at a species level, which is in part a function of our distressed planet, of which we are part.
yeah.
I wonder how you, just knowing what you know about the wandering nerve and about the nervous system, how does that feel relevant to you in terms of an analysis for all of us and navigating this time of great tumult and uncertainty and a lot of violence? And what we're called to be present to.
The wandering nerve is amazing because it arises out of the brainstem outside of our spinal cords. So it's an ancient structure, and it connects to what's called in medicine the viscera, where all the organs are, this egg. But on its way down through the jaw, it goes through the larynx and the epiglottis and the structures in the throat. And I think one of the earliest teachings of midwifery is that, we tell mothers, don't be singing arias in labor. Push low with your diaphragm to help open those structures, because the wandering nerve connects the larynx with the cervix, which is the doorway that needs to open 10 centimeters to let a baby out. There's a lot to it, but so really what's going on is you're being in your animal being, that once having gone there through a guttural sound or, alone and when is that most available to us human beings is when we're reproducing and defecating. We're animals. And so to find your way into your primitive being, you can connect it into your body through systems. I mean, why is breath so powerful? Usually we begin breathing to calm. And I just spent 2 weeks on a boat with activists from around the world. And one of our leadership is here with us, Amelia Rose Barlow, who would begin every session with the breathing to lower our anxiety, our self-doubt, all the baggage we bring in the room with us, just let it go so you can land and be present. Yeah.
And that is a muscle we need.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the word wisdom, and I wonder, one of the things you've said, another phrase, is that wisdom sees relational wealth.
Yeah.
Right, and I think, wisdom can be certainly related to a life of accomplishment or knowledge that one can quantify and point at, but it is also something distinct. And I think that's a wonderful way to talk about what makes it wisdom as opposed to knowledge. But I also feel like there's this equation of old and wise, right? Which is, everybody doesn't grow wise. A lot of people just grow old, right? And also that I think one of you last night used the language of young elders. So I think there are different kinds of wisdom. And I almost feel in these new generations coming up, there's a kind of an evolutionary wisdom that comes at a much younger age. And so I wonder how you think about what wisdom is and about the different wisdoms that come with different stages of life.
Different stages of life. Yeah, because you've engaged more, hopefully. I think for me, you have to find a sense of purpose and that wisdom that it takes to feel you've manifested your purpose. You make your mistakes. I like to say, I like to make mistakes. That's how you learn. And my brother and I, we're one of 4 that were orphaned at a very young age. And even though we have a whole constellation of aunties and uncles and all that, our mother did the best she could for us to be safe. And I'm grateful to her for that. So the wisdom she carried as a young mother of 42, leaving 4 children, 15 and under, in the world, that's the kind of wisdom. I don't know how she did that. But she's a very intelligent woman. So hopefully you have wisdom around you as you're growing up in a community, in a kinship structure. And I think for Indigenous people, we still have that. We still have families. I mean, our son lives across the road, and our granddaughter built a house behind us, and our cousins are not far away. In fact, she's sitting right there. So wisdom grows in that relational web of being. And for my family, we follow through happenstance of the Mayan people coming to our village looking for help in the late 70s, early 80s, that we follow a medicine of time so that we have a better hold on what's occurring. It's one thing to have a dream, it's another thing to interpret it. And the medicine of time is useful because it relates to birth, dream, and ceremony. So it's a natural for our family. And so the wisdom lives inside of that interpretive capacity of the ones you grow up with, the ones you learn from, and the purpose you aim to create, to meet, to manifest. And you use what tools are put in front of you because you made a prayer. Show me what I need to know. What do I need to learn to be able to handle 2 lives? And the prayer comes back in a ceremony at the key moment. Just do it. So in the wisdom in there is working in the flow, to have enough of preparation for a particular moment and to call that to you, all those vital forces you accumulate. The thread of all that is where the wisdom is. And it comes at you based on your prayer. And these women, I mean, I learned a lot about prayer from my sister-in-law, Apetulutawi, Loretta Afraid-of-Bear Cook, her commitment to ceremony, because when she was the firstborn of 2 lineages of the Oglala Lakota people, and tucked under her grandpa's arm, while all the other kids were allowed to play outside and be children, she was learning the old people's language, hearing the old people's conversation, and the old people's teachings about 7 different sacred rites attached to the Sundance. It isn't just Sundance. So all of that wisdom lives in that ancestral consciousness. And there's wisdom among the Mayan, and there's wisdom among the 6 nations. So you learn about kinship, and how to get along across a house of 3 clans. So wherever you are situated in your life's journey, you look for those tools, you continue to look for that wisdom to carry you to the next place. But the first wisdom is connection to your own spirit. If you start there, you're going to be pretty much okay.
And maybe from there you will discern what you need to look for in others.
Absolutely. The surprise of being an elder, there's so much more to know. But I take comfort from Sakokonyunkos's wisdom. I was at a session he did several months ago in our community. He said, it's like a cup. You pour wisdom in your cup through your life, knowledge. And then the cup only holds so much. You can't spill it all over. So be satisfied at a certain point. And my satisfaction is using what wisdom that was embedded in me by my ancestors, my grandmothers, my mother, my father, my cousins, my in-laws, my outlaws, my bylaws, as she says. So, yeah.
And as you know, American culture is especially ritual poor. And also, just in modernity, this very natural and necessary reality of just webs of kinship that one is born into has been broken. Mm-hmm. And I think what this gathering and other things happening in our world represent is it's an unnatural thing for our species, but people who are being new humans are having to seek out those webs of kinship, right? Mm-hmm, create mm-hmm. elders and family, and also find their way to ritual. I'm so curious about how this is going to evolve. I wonder if it's been fascinating for you to be sought out in this way from outside your own culture.
I'm sought out mostly from inside my own culture. That was the whole point. I never really expected that the Cree of the Hudson Bay area, who signed an agreement where energy companies would pay them to move them from an island, their ancestral home, to a mainland site, so that they could create a series of dams. And that these dams, the increased water power would likely destroy the island that they lived on through erosion over time. I was up there this summer visiting them, and they used some of the money they got from selling electric to the south. If it weren't for the Cree of the Hudson Bay area, New York City would have no lights. That electricity comes from the Cree. And this year they invested in 8 training 6 to 8 Indigenous midwifery students right in their communities. Because the only option is for the mother at 36, 38 weeks or in labor to fly to a village to the south where they're treated really badly because of racism. So the colleges of Quebec and Ontario that I and my peers established in the 1990s, those younger professors are involved in the community-based education of 6 Cree Indigenous midwives who are now delivering babies in their communities in a birthing home. So the commitment, Sturgeon Lake, they're building a birthing center in north of Minnesota. And Indigenous women leaders are starting to respond to this call to take care of the local. In the US, you've heard the conditions were like 174th in infant mortality in the world. Infant mortality is the measure of the coherence of a society. So I always chose through the women. And these elder women have amazing stories that capture that kind of wisdom, that birth, partnerships, making relatives, the life's transitions, Oharlogo rites of passage, the continuity of the sacred from the conception to the transition to a different reality.
You know, one final phrase that you used, I wondered if you'd offer it to this group, was this notion of double balance, finding double balance in life. And you also said, I heard you say of Loretta, that she is someone who embodies that for you.
Wow. Sister-in-law. In this medicine of time, it starts with your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we follow that gear of numbers, rotating spiritual days. If I was at each of your home births, I could tell you what day you were born on in the Mayan calendar and what it means to your destiny. But the 8, the 1 is unity, 2 is duality, 3 is a rotor of growth and development, 4, like today, is the 4 directions, whole, complete. Skaili, in Mohawk, the number 4 is instructive of this bigger concept of the internal significance of a number. 5 is one hand, 6 is a dynamic growth and development. Also, the strongest pattern of nature is the 6-sided structure. 7 is a pivot between the earth and the sky. And 8, you're doubly balanced. He's my double balance. Together we're 8. And so it's a strongly situated in the 4 directions balance. And I have a hairpiece like my sister-in-law, but I forgot to bring a suitcase with all my stuff in it. But it's like that, sister-in-law. You're an 8 too. That's your number 8, double balance. All you got to do is look at her and see what double balance looks like. Her and her husband, my brother, they're double balance together, and she's double balanced just herself.
I feel like just the word balance is something that easily eludes in this time, and that even the word itself or an image of that or practices towards that are medicine that we need.
You're sitting in it, in a circle with 4 directions. You're sitting in a universe made of circles. Each has its 4 directions, and you have your 4 directions. Find it. You already know it. Or maybe you just don't know how to touch base with that, but it's like anything about loving the earth. That means you got to get out there and touch her, work with her, cultivate life force. Your 4 directions are to be found in yourself first, and then in concentric circles out. So finding balance in this group, you got to learn how to get along, which is one of my beloved sister-in-law, Loretta, afraid of bear, Apetuluta we cook. Her matrilineal teachings from her mother. First, learn how to get along. Sometimes that means you got to learn how to get along with yourself. And then you can go out to those circles from the inside out.
I just want to, would you tell the story of your shoes?
Thank you for asking.
Well, I mean, They're beautiful and enchanting, and they have some meaning for you.
Yes, my husband and I and our beloved family members live in the enchantment together. And part of our enchantment you can see across this lake to the Adirondack biosphere, which is our sacred hills. We go there for medicine. And we had our first gathering of these 8 leaders in Lake Placid. And Henrietta Mann, who was a little girl sitting under the kitchen table fingering her grandmother's scar on her leg because her grandmother was a child survivor of the Sand Creek massacre of the Cheyenne. And her story is in this book, and she was about 83 when she came to our meeting. She's an accomplished scholar and an accomplished, her Cheyenne name means prayer woman. And she's just a remarkable elder, as you'll read. And she showed up with shoes just like this, only they were white and even brighter. And I highly recommend these shoes to any woman of any age from 0 to 115. And for me, they reflect the cosmos, the star people, the skyland, and I wore them on the boat. And a lot of younger women, where did you get those? I need a pair like that. So go ahead, let's start wearing the kind of shoes that remind us of something. Something good.
Yeah, sorry. There was a question about joy, and I just want to say, just having been with you for this little while, I experienced all of you to cultivate joy and fun, and actually just fun, as part of resilience, right? It is life. It is life force, right? We have to keep reaching for life force, especially as Valiant activists. I just, what a joy it has been to be in your presence and to be able to ask a few questions and take in some of your wisdom. There's something you said that you wrote in the book of the research that led to the book. With each and all of them, these women, we deepened the delightful process of getting to know each other's lives, and I like to say, we began to line up our spirits. So I like to think that what we did in this room for an hour, 2 hours, is begin to line up our spirits, and we're very grateful to you for that. Thank you.
Do you feel aligned? Good.
Katsi Cook is a midwife, elder, executive director of the Spirit Aligned Leadership Program, and a Wolf Clan member of the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation. She resides at the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe in upstate New York. Her body of work connects health research scientists, community health professionals, and community members. Her groundbreaking environmental research of Mohawk mother's milk revealed the intergenerational impact of industrial chemicals on the health and well-being of an entire community. She leads a movement of matrilineal awareness and rematriation in Native life. This episode was produced by Chris Heagle, Zach Rose, Julie Seipel, Kayla Edwards, Tiffany Champion, Carla Zanoni, and Andrea Prevost. Many special thanks this week to Jennifer Brandel and Mada Zapata, MCK Kiefreiter, Amelia Rose Barlow, Sarah Jelena Walcott, and Abra Clausen. Also, Reverend Don Chatfield, Tammy Saltis, and the All Souls Interfaith Gathering Congregation. Read full, splendid credits for the people and groups who pulled this intergenerational experience together in the episode show notes. Our funding partners include the Hearthland Foundation, helping to build a more just, equitable, and connected America, one creative act at a time. the Fetzer Institute, supporting a movement of organizations that are applying spiritual solutions to society's toughest problems. Find them at fetzer.org. Calliopeia Foundation, dedicated to cultivating the connections between ecology, culture, and spirituality, supporting initiatives and organizations that uphold sacred relationships with the living earth. Learn more at calliopeia.org. And the Osprey Foundation, a catalyst for empowered, healthy, and fulfilled lives. On Being is an independent production of the On Being Project based in Minnesota and New York City.